entitled Transmedia, Transcultural Memories. I'm not sure what I represent here. I'd like to think I represent an oral historian who's worked on some of the issues which are relevant today. When you invited me first, I thought all I have to do is to present the project I'm currently working on, which you found on your chair, called Sephardi Voices UK. But when I saw the title of the panel, I realized this was going to be slightly more challenging. So what I'd like to do today is to take each of the themes of the panel, transmedia, transcultural, and memories, and reflect briefly on these themes from my academic perspective as an oral historian, photographer, and filmmaker within the framework of some of the projects I've worked on. So, is the PowerPoint not coming on? Okay, I'll ignore the PowerPoint, you just have to listen to me for a little bit. Let us start with memory and oral history. What is oral history? Is it? Okay.
I know what.
Oral history, one definition is the recording and interpretation of spoken testimonies about an individual's past. The discipline of oral history emerged in the UK within an effort to create history from below, Alltagsgeschichte, quote, to give history back to the people in their own words. At the end of the 70s and the 80s, this sort of recovery or gathering focus moved, and the focus started to be memory, personal, historical, individual, and generational. And today, memory is an integral part of any oral history study. Thank you. The concept of history from below and giving voice have informed all the oral history projects I have worked on. So in my study on the Jewish community of Salonika, which you can see here, I used the method of fieldwork, oral history, and photography to document Jewish life in the city and reconstruct memories of Jewish history in Salonika, which at the time were not represented elsewhere. And this was my first visit to Salonika was in 1989. They were certainly not represented in guidebooks or in history books. This has slightly changed today. In 1989, Jewish memory was found within the realms of what Jan Assmann calls, the scholar of memory, communicative memory. It was not part of a wider Greek cultural memory. And this was embodied in the urban landscape of the city. The synagogues, the community center, the school could not have been recognized by most non-Jewish inhabitants. And in sort of slight contrast to what Paris does here on the wall, I think he was sort of slightly looking for absence. I think I was looking for presence of about 1,000 Jews who are still in Salonika, the remainder of a population of about 55,000 before World War II. What I found was a private presence and fragments of Jewish history, and that's both in the city and in my interviews. And at the time, some survivors did not want to confront their traumatic past, and some were very keen to tell the stories. So when I set out the project, I actually didn't anticipate the kind of book I was going to write, because I didn't really look for history. I didn't want to record people's experience during World War II, but they came to me, and I recorded them when people wanted to talk. In other cases, people said, I don't want to talk, it's too painful, and I left it. So, just to show you a few slides, here you can see this was the community center. All you can see is Republiki Thessaloniki. This is there are two synagogues. There's a small synagogue in this office building. Again, you can't see anything from outside. Inside the building, it lists the synagogues which were founded in Thessaloniki. Here is the big synagogue called Monasteriaton Synagogue, which survived the German occupation because it was used as a warehouse. And here's a picture of a Holocaust Day commemoration, eternal memory. But it was all located inside. And here you have pictures from the cemetery, which was mentioned today, which was destroyed in 1942 by the Germans and became the Aristoteles University. So when I came first to Salonika, this picture was taken at the university. I don't think the tombstones are there anymore, but they're in all other parts of the city, in the Anopoli, in Saranda Ecclesias, and in other parts. So in a way, they kind of represent the sort of fragmented memory I found at the time. The result of my research is my book, which hopefully gave a place to the voices of Jewish Salonicans which were not heard before. And reflecting on the theme of transmedia for this panel, I realized that despite the fact that I took thousands of photos and recorded hours of interview, I only represented the interviews within the academic framework in the book, and very few photographs have ended up in the book. And perhaps one of the reasons for this is that the medium of film and photography is a more public medium. And in my book, I felt that I needed to guard the anonymity of the interviewees. And this is partly because when I did my field work, I went there as a social anthropologist. I didn't worry about release forms. And I said, I'll do an interview, I'll change your names, don't worry about anything. Then I came home and I looked at the interviews and I looked at the narratives, and I felt the names should be attached to the narratives. And I had a big problem with it. So in my PhD, I actually changed all the names. In my book, I used the real first names and abbreviated surname, which I felt more comfortable with. So although I don't use the word transculturalism in my book, the concept is of utmost importance, and it's in two ways. First, the ways in which the interviewees describe cross-communal and cross-cultural contact, and as we heard before, in schools, in business, in friendship. And we need to remember that Salonika was Ottoman until 1912. The Jews from the south had been part of the Greek state for much longer, and hence had a better command of the Greek language, and often had closer relationship to the Greek population. And also class played a role here, and we discussed this today, whether cosmopolitan is a class issue or not. And I would say sometimes the working class had even more contact among each other than the bourgeoisie. The second factor is being Salonican, belonging to the city, is often presented as a transcultural identity which transcends political boundaries, both Ottoman and Greek, expressed by many of my interviewees. And here you can see Lili Molcho, born in 1912. So she says, "It is La Patrie, it's the place of my own religion, it's the place of my ancestors. 500 years, they sweated and died here. I feel Thessalonikia, I was born in here. I have people in the old cemetery. I am from Salonika. To whom Salonika belongs is another matter. What I am, I am." Just this gives you a kind of glimpse about my research. So this brings me now to the second project I'd like to present to you today, which is the work of Sephardi voices. The nature of this project is very different from my Salonican research. It's an explicit oral history project where release forms are very important, where we tell immediately people, how do you want to be recognized? Do you want to be identified by name? Do you want to close your interviews for 20 years? Which is all possible. It is a multi-institutional project, and it's international. The aim of Sephardi Voices is to create an archive of mostly filmed interviews of displaced Jews from North Africa, the Middle East and Iran, who left in different waves of emigration post-1948 and settled in various countries, such as the US, Canada, Israel and the UK. Sephardi Voices UK captures the stories of those Jews who settled in the UK and sometimes came via another country. The estimated number of this population group today in Britain is around 15,000, which constitutes 6% of British Jewry. Despite their relatively small number, the Sephardi Mizrahi Jews represent the largest group of post-war Jewish migrants to the UK. So let me just say a little bit about the interviews. We're conducting live history interviews. They last from 2 to 5 hours. And we're also creating a photographic archive by filming photographs and documents at the end of the interview. The interviews are conducted in the home of the interviewees. We choose a head and shoulder shot, which remains constant during the interview, and only at the end the camera zooms out of the picture to give the viewer a sense of the wider space. And here you can just see some of the photographs and some of the old photographs the interviewees bring to the interview. Here's two Moroccan interviews. Again, Moroccan interviews. This is a married couple from Sudan. So up to June 2014, we have conducted 8 audio interviews and 58 video interviews. And here you can see the breakdown of countries. So the biggest group is Iraq, Egypt, followed by the other countries. The gender, we've interviewed 22 women and 36 men, and 7 women and 1 man for the audio. Gender is an important aspect, and I think that will come out in the analysis. The themes discussed are different. Gender influences the spatial experiences of the city, for example, about shopping, going to the market, and so forth. The age. The oldest interviewee was born in 1912 in Baghdad. The youngest interviewee was born in 1959 in Beirut. And we're delighted to announce that the first 52 interviews are now deposited at the British Library. And you can order them to be watched in the British Library reading room. And I have some more information, but you can Google it. You have to, they're not available online. You have to make an appointment, and they will prepare the interviews in the reading room. So I think the narratives as memories of the Sephardi Voices interviews are of utmost relevance to the concept discussed in the conference: transculturalism, transnationalism, cosmopolitanism, conviviality. We can find out if these concepts appear in the interview, in the memories of childhoods and lost homelands, but also in the construction of identities today. How do the interviewees represent the multicultural, transcultural aspects of their lives in schools, clubs, in work? Which aspects of their lives were transnational? Iraqi Jewish trading networks, they span from Baghdad to Bombay to Singapore to Manchester. Education in European schools, sometimes being educated in the UK or in France. How do they talk about their feelings of belonging to place and state? And I would argue that citizenship is also a transcultural identity, which transcended religious and communal boundaries. So, for example, Eileen Khalaschi was born 1929 in Baghdad, tells me, she tells me, but I tell you, we were Iraqis, we cherished our country. So whatever happened, we didn't want to. We never thought of leaving the country. We had good friends, Muslim friends. And at the end of the interview, she says, no, I'm not British. No, I'm Iraqi, 100% Iraqi. And I love Iraq. But unfortunately, we can't be there. So while the overall context of post-colonialism and end of empire and the advance of nationalism is relevant to all interviewees, we, of course, need to be aware that the different historical situation in each country produce very different narratives, and the experience of each individual differs as well. There's gender, there's age, what age were they when they left, the time of leaving, did they leave Iraq in 1951 or Iraq in 1974, did they leave Egypt pre or after 1956. So we're dealing with different scales of persecution. So on the one hand, you have the Iraqi experience of the Farhud, the anti-Jewish pogrom in 1941. You have lack of opportunities, exclusion, loss of freedom of movement. You had public hangings in 1969. And on the other, you have the Moroccan experience, where many interviews describe a good relationship, and they emigrated only in the 60s. And I think Sami Zubeida raised a very interesting point this morning, saying that cosmopolitanism and transculturalism survive today only in the diasporas and in the use of social media. This is a very important topic in the Sephardi Voices archive, as it enables us to compare the settlement of Jews from North Africa and the Middle East and Iran in different countries, and allows us to understand how the interviewees conceive of themselves, and often their family members have settled across different continents and different countries, and how they negotiate their current multi-layered identities. I'd like to show you now an extract of a very short film based on an interview with Ivy Shashua, born in Baghdad, which touches on some of the themes I've discussed. This film is part of a series of short films called Lives in Focus, which we have produced, freshly produced today for you, and which will be on our website shortly. And here's the film. I'd like to invite you to explore this rich archive of Sephardi voices, and I hope that the stories of the interviewees in the different medial representation, as text, as films, as photographs, will become part of your research and the wider cultural memory of both the interviewees' countries of birth and current countries of residence. Thank you.